Welcome to Beyond the Frontline podcast, where your host, U.S. Air Force veteran Donna Hoffmeyer, will help you transition from the front line to the home front. Listen every other Wednesday as we'll bring great conversations, resources, tips, and feel-good stories that will resonate and relate. Now, here's your host, Donna Hoffmeyer.
Hey everyone, it's Donna, and it is another fabulous week at Beyond the Front Line. And I, this week, am excited to get a little nerdy. So we're going to end up talking about neuroscience and neuroplasticity and how we make the brain work better and how the brain tries to survive on its own and doesn't always do a great job at it, and how, with technology and a lot of smart people, how we can make it work better. So this week, we are going to be talking to a very, very unique person. His name is Tony Crescenzo. He's the president and CEO of Intelligent Wave, LLC. It's a service-disabled veteran-owned company that provides IT system integration, cybersecurity, and mission-critical technology solutions to the U.S. government, defense. Yeah. We're not going to talk about that today. What we're going to talk about, what we're going to talk about is what he has also founded, which is called Peak Neuro, LLC, a neuroscience plus AI human performance company focused on enhancing cognitive performance, sleep, recovery, resilience, and on helping individuals, which includes our heroes, veteran first responders, that operate better under pressure, which is kind of humorous because helping veterans, like the reason why we got the brain injuries because we were under pressure. we have to. We're going to actually talk about that because you mentioned something about Colombia, and we're gonna bring that around later. But Tony, how are you?
I'm great, and thanks for having me.
I read your bio, but you know what you didn't put in there? You didn't put that you were a veteran too.
That's really interesting. Well, I didn't write that.
You didn't write it. You have people.
No.
You're people.
We, not mine.
So that's where I want to start, because everybody knows, like, when I do these podcasts, my big thing about this is why. Nobody wakes up and says, oh yeah, I'm going to start this neuroscience company, or I'm going to go start a nonprofit. And any of us in that world are like, yeah, nobody just randomly thinks that. It just isn't. We have a why, right? Something happened along the way that kind of got us going, like, wait a minute, we can do this better. Or wait a minute, maybe we didn't connect those dots the right way, or whatever that may be. So having said that, before we ever talk about neuroscience, I just want to talk about you and where you started and then how you got into this. So I'll let you start where you want.
Okay. Well, let's start with probably something that most of your listeners are familiar with. Have you ever heard of direct?
Not necessarily vanilla.
So if you may have met, you may know of, or you may be one of those veterans who goes from 0 to fuck you in 10 seconds. Maybe you've been in a few bar fights and thought they were fun and sport and not necessarily the kind of terrible thing that most people think about. Maybe your first wife, second wife, and daughter have all been victims of your inability to control anger and PTSD. Maybe you've heard of those veterans who don't even know how angry they are. You certainly don't want to get in a car with them. I mean, that's the worst thing you want to do, because somebody cuts them off, it's on. And it's on till the end, right? It's really bad. The interesting thing is that was me. I was that guy for a long time and didn't even really realize it. In my time in the Marine Corps, I spent some time in Beirut. I wasn't permanent personnel there. I was transitioned in and out several times. Came back from Beirut and worked for what I think the listeners know as now NCIS. Back in the day, it was NIS, and an undercover role for just under 3 years in a drug and fraud investigation that was, well, let me put it this way. Back in those days, see those cool NCIS guys on TV? Yeah, back in those days, the people in NCIS or NIS, they were the folks who washed out of the FBI Academy, not the world's best crime fighters, right? So,
We're not dogging
uh,
on you. Don't come after us. We're just stating
you know,
facts.
literally the worst gunfights I'd ever been in were inside the United States with people trying to kill me. So, it's a lot more comfortable and safe in Beirut with all my friends with guns. Um, so over the course of, probably 25 years, never really realizing how much it had affected me. And earlier we were talking about the VA, but I remember in the 90s I was looking for some help. And I found a therapist who had done 3 tours in Vietnam, and I thought, man, that guy's seen 100,000 times more bad things than I have. This would be a great guy for me. Third session in, he says, "You know what? I can't treat you. You're activating me."
Oh,
And
you were
yeah,
triggering him.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's not a good place to be.
He
And
needed to go get a
unfortunate,
little help. Yeah.
yeah, unfortunately, both wives and my daughter, I think, suffered for that. Well, you had by the way, I love your podcast. I listened to an episode on psychedelic medicine with Charlie Powell, which I thought was
Oh,
really cool.
yes. That was
And
amazing. Yeah.
one of the things you both talked about was a high functioning brain.
Mm-hmm.
And your brain is nothing more or less than your body's electrical system adapting to the life that you personally have led. So dysregulation is only a term that applies if you're looking at quote unquote normative behaviors. And it's not normative to be in combat for 12 years, see the things that a lot of veterans have seen. So it's a little bit of a misnomer to say that, a PTSD brain is dysregulated. Absolutely not. You had to have that brain, that adaptation to your neurophysiology to survive. The problem is your body came home, but the rest of you is still where you were. And that was true for me. So interestingly enough, and you really can't make this up, my wife and I have a beach house on the Eastern Shore of Virginia. Summer of 2022, I had a meeting scheduled with a 3-letter intelligence agency. And I got an email that it was being moved to a different location, and I had never heard of the location. So I mis-Googled the name of the location and came up with a 1983 Defense Intelligence Agency declassified document on a neurophysiology or neurophysiological entrainment technology that was being evaluated like 40 years ago.
Oh, my God.
And and my wife and I are physics nerds, so we were both fascinated with, and look, you're a retired Air Force nurse.
Yeah.
Uh, how long were you in the Air Force?
21.
21 years. So
Oh,
I
yeah.
think we've both probably read thousands, if not 10,000s, tens of thousands of military documents.
Oh, God,
Never,
yes.
never seen anything like this before. Written by a lieutenant colonel, and it started with, in order for me to describe how this works, first you have to understand what is reality, and what is the nature of the universe, and what is wave particle duality. This is 1983.
Wow.
So you couldn't know these things. They were not measurable. The shape of the universe, its size, construction was not known in 1983. Yet in 2022, I think the Nobel Prize in Physics was for wave particle duality. So we're reading this 40 years old and realizing this all is real. I mean, it was speculation back then. So I started to do some research, and I looked and saw that this research institute where this tests were conducted was not too far from where I live, and they still had a program down there. So I signed up and went down having no idea, what it was about. I was kind of on a goof. And 2 weeks later, this is just after the pandemic, I would run into people who I hadn't seen for 2 years. And everyone had the same reaction. Boy, you seem so different. You seem different. You're calmer. The nightmares went away. I was a 3-week nightmare guy, kicking,
Yeah.
screaming, waking up friends, wives. I have cousins that I used to take an annual duck hunting trip with, and they all refused to room with me
Ah!
because, in the night I would have a dream, and sometimes I would just laugh maniacally for 15 minutes, and it freaked them all out. So no one even wanted to share like a hotel room with me. And in the course of a couple of weeks, it was a fundamental transformation for me that was noticed by my current wife, my daughter, my ex-wife, friends, people who know me closely. And I wanted to understand what happened, what was it all about? And it was an older based neuroacoustic technology. And I ran into a gentleman by the name of Bob Holbrook, who has 31 years experience of designing and creating this kind of entrainment.
Yeah.
And Bob had worked in addiction therapy and a number of other areas. A brilliant, brilliant guy. You know, talking earlier about talking to smart people. I mean, that guy's like the Wile E. Coyote of neuro entrainment.
Yeah.
And I don't think he even knows a thing about neuroscience. So one of the things that I was most interested in was, well, so you're telling me, I mean, I have a subjective experience, right? The phenomenology works. I wake up, I sleep well. You know, here's a great example. I'm 64 years old today. It's not my birthday today, but today as we speak. The average 64-year-old gets somewhere between 18 and 22% restorative sleep. That's a combination of slow wave sleep, which restores you physically,
Yeah.
and by the way, prevents Alzheimer's and dementia,
Yeah.
and NREM sleep, REM sleep that imprints memory and helps you resolve emotional issues. Well, I started out at around 20%, and 6 months after using this technology, I get 54%.
That's why you look so young.
That's yeah, I don't look that young, trust me. Somebody just accused me of looking like Rocky Blyer, and I think he's a Vietnam veteran, so that's not really a good thing. But it was so compelling that I talked to Bob and said, really, I want to do this. I want to do this for veterans, right? I'm on the advisory board of the Semper Fi Fund. I've run 8 different defense contractors, military technology companies, and we're very mission focused. The company I run today, Intelligent Waves, is number 2 in best companies for veterans to work for on monster.com.
Very
50%
cool.
of our employees are veterans, half again are combat veterans, about a quarter are special operators,
Yeah.
Delta Force, Navy SEALs, Marine Raiders. So, you know, we're right there in the mission. And because of that, it's not unusual for 5, 6, 7, 8 times a year for me to get a phone call about an employee who just went sideways sitting on the flight line at Eielson Air Force Base up in Alaska.
Seen it many
Or down
times.
down in Eglin. And the next call is like to the retired Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps, Carlton Kent. Hey, Carlton, you know, do you have a place I can put this guy? Or he'll call me. So I thought, boy, what a great way to sort of help veterans. Because it helped me, right? And I won't say I was typical, but I think like you and like Charlie, it was easier for me to hide it in that high functioning brain. Right?
Yeah.
When you're a CEO, people just think you're kind of irascible.
Yeah, nothing
you
shakes
can-
you.
right.
You don't have any, yeah.
Yeah. You know, just an amazing perspective that people have. So we formed Peak Neuro with the express intention originally of working specifically with veterans. And we built a set of programs around it. We tested the technology. We're actually working now with individual veterans who have very specific issues like traumatic brain injury and concussion and PTSD and chronic depression.
Let me ask this. Did you start this when you were still like, when did you get out of the military and when you started this? What was the time frame?
Oh God, I got out of the military in 1988.
So this wasn't even like on your radar. What were you doing in between? You got to tell people your background. That's why I was giggling.
So I was after. Well, I'll give you a little bit of context. After I ended my undercover activity, and which resulted in 10 court-martial convictions.
Nice job.
General courts-martial for the people that I was investigating.
You earned your dollar.
One of whom, well. Maybe. One of them was a gunnery sergeant who was an admin chief who was creating people who didn't exist in the manpower management system, getting checks cut and then cashing the checks. And in my role, I was working for him. And after it was discovered that he was being charged and I was testifying against him, the battalion commander of the unit that I was assigned to got PCS'd or transferred to Okinawa. The new battalion commander came in and said, you know what? I don't care if he's testifying against the guy. I don't have anybody to run the payroll. So I wound up working for this guy who I was testifying against. And then the other 9 guys, who are all Vietnam veterans and people who know how to kill people, there were 3 other witnesses. Two were murdered. One died in a car accident. And there were 2 attempts on my life.
My God.
But I was forced to stay there. Literally forced. Like the Marine Corps just ignored me. The one organization, right? What's our motto? Semper Fidelis, always faithful. We never leave our dead or wounded on the battlefield. Except you. You have to stay there.
You're staying.
Marine Corps, anybody I could think of that went nowhere.
Holy
And eventually,
crap.
well, The Marine Corps is not like the Air Force. We're real small. Everybody knows everybody. And I was a corporal at the time. So, and testifying against people who were first sergeants and master sergeants and staff sergeants and gunnery sergeants.
Oh, God. Did you have to like get out after that? I mean, was that your option? Was like,
That's why I got out, because I was afraid
how many
it
years you
just
do?
wasn't 8 in total. Yeah.
Oh, you had to.
Yeah.
Like you wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be having
Well,
this conversation.
Well, so what happened was after my court martial, where I was convicted of being 20 minutes late to work and fined $20, but lost all of my security clearances. I got a phone call from the monitor at headquarters Marine Corps who said, "I have instructions to send you anywhere in the world you want to go. We heard from your congressman." And I said, "Well, send me to the closest place in my home of record. Fuck you. I'm getting out of the Marine Corps." They
Holy,
made me a they made me a files clerk at a reserve unit in Garden City, New York. And 8 months to the day after I joined that unit, where no one would talk to me because nobody knew anything, they just knew I was some guy where everybody in that whole unit got court-martialed. Sat in a room with no windows for 8 months. Nobody wanted to PT, play poker, do anything with me. In walks the aide de camp to the commandant of the Marine Corps with a check for $20. They overturned my court-martial. A promotion, a medal, a certificate of appreciation from the commandant, or whatever, a commendation from the commandant, and a copy of the letter of apology that he wrote to my mother.
whoa. I bet your
So,
unit was confused.
oh yeah, well they were like, "Oh my God, who's that guy?" We thought he was some
Now we like
shitbird.
him,
Well, yeah,
sort of.
but because I had the technology training and it was 1988. This was at the very really beginning of the technology revolution around computer science. So
Right.
I got recruited out of that New York reserve unit to work for a company that went from about 11 employees to the largest M&A transaction of 1989, and made a ton of money. I worked for some really smart people who had founded and created GE Information Systems.
Oh, wow.
Three amazing businessmen and leaders, people I still think of as really the people who taught me most of what I know. And so I spent a couple of years there, and then I wound up actually getting recruited to come down to Virginia to work for a startup that was competing against the world's fourth largest software company. And I did so much damage to that software company and pissed them off so much that they hired me.
Ah,
And I
hire in the hacker.
pretty much, yeah, and I wound up not working for their education group, which I was competing against, but I worked for the Federal Systems Division, and I became the director of technical operations there, and spent 6 years, and I got to travel all over the world. It's a global company: China, Germany, Italy, Hong Kong.
How cool.
The Germans used to call me Dirty Tony because they would send me places to fire people. Right, so I was like Dirty Harry for them. I'd just go around shoot everybody, and that, by the way, is pretty hard in France and Italy and Germany. There's a lot of different labor laws there. So I got great business experience. Then I founded two companies and sold them, and I became what I think in commercial parlance is a professional CEO. I get hired by individual big companies through.
Oh, wow.
I'm kind of like a really, really expensive janitor.
Little jack of all trades janitor. Holy, I mean, that's a wide breath right there.
So the founder of Intelligent Waves, a guy named Jared Shepard, incredible person who was homeless, living in his car, joined the army to get 3 meals a day,
Wow.
and wound up inventing a technology to defeat IEDs, which is what Intelligent Waves is really founded on.
Wow.
So we're really completely focused on supporting the mission. We are all over the world doing work that you may see in the news. About 75-80% of our work is very highly classified. A lot of people sitting in skiffs. So we have a veteran bent. And when I discovered this technology, I thought we really needed to do two things. One was we really needed to get it focused on people who need it, and the second was there's a commercial aspect to this too. Trauma isn't just for veterans. There's tons of first responders out there. There's tons of people who just live in their lives and have, you think about what is trauma. You have this autobiography in your head. It's me. This is my life that I lived my whole life. And you have this event happen and it completely screws up your autobiography. How do I make it fit? And when I do that, when it's so different than what I'm used to, when it changes who I thought I was, it just destroys my ability to really operate efficiently in the world. And typically how we resolve that, how we've done it for years, decades, is psychotherapy. Nothing wrong with psychotherapy, but here's basically how psychotherapy works. It's all narrative based. It's semantic, right? I'm going to go talk, I got to go sit with somebody and tell them my deepest, darkest, baddest stuff. And when I do that, I have to relive it. And when I relive it, my brain believes I'm still there. And because it believes I'm still there, I'm sweating, I'm hyperventilating, I'm angry, I'm fearful, and I can't contain that. It takes me over. And psychotherapy is great, but how many people go to a psychotherapist once?
And don't go back. And the compliance,
well, how many people go once and they're cured?
No.
Right? Never.
Never.
It takes time.
But, go ahead.
Well, let me just finish the thought. Here's the thing about psychotherapy. It's all narrative based, and it's a semantic way to resolve trauma. I need to think about it, create a narrative, understand the narrative, and then find a way to make it fit into that autobiography. There's a better way. And it's not better in the sense that it obviates the need for psychotherapy. Psychotherapy is a tried and true thing, and I'm not telling people not to do it. But in addition to that, you can create neural pathways for people. You can create an experience where you're capable of resolving that trauma, not pathways in your brain that even deal with narratives. You can't even really think about the narrative, and we activate the parts of your brain that deal with symbolism and with symbolic ignition. And it allows you somatically through your body to digest trauma without having to really think about it. In fact, it just kind of feels like you're having a dream you can't remember. Now, does that work overnight? No, but it works in months. It works in weeks and months, right, and not in years.
So,
I know that because we've tested it not only on over 200 test subjects at this point, but unfortunately, like the hair club for men guy, because if we're not on video, but I don't have a lot of hair. I'm not just a spokesmodel, right? I use this stuff. And here's the best part. Let me tell you the last thing.
Okay.
I told you about my sleep. I used the sleep tech for 6 months, and I haven't used it for a year and a half. And my physiology is such that I can just go to sleep in 4 minutes, and I sleep at 50% on average every night.
So let me unpack a lot of this. This is yes, and yes. Let me just start with all of that. First of all, I had the funniest story, and this veteran summarized this so perfectly. I was working with, and the audience probably heard the story before I said it in the past, but I was working with a veteran treatment court. And they allowed me to go in and listen to each case, like behind the scenes, right? I get to go sit and I wasn't trying to listen to get dirt. I was trying to listen to what resources can we bring to the court that would help them, that would enhance this, right? So anyways, I was there one day in their normal session, and we got done, and I'm leaving, and this was after the court session, and we're walking out, and there's a veteran walking kind of with me, and we start talking. I don't know how we get in the subject of his past and therapy and whatnot, but we start talking about it somehow. And he says to me, ma'am, he's like, I did therapy. I said, you did? He goes, yeah. He goes, so I had a therapist, and I didn't like it. And I said, why is that? He goes, because she'd ask me, like, oh, do you have a nightmare? Yes. Well, tell me about your nightmare. And he looked at me, he goes, ma'am. He's like, when you have a nightmare, do you want to fucking tell somebody about your nightmare? And I'm like, valid point. If I have a nightmare, I might mention it to my husband, but I probably don't get into details. Like, you don't. Why
Exactly.
do we not want to do that? Because we don't like how we feel. And when we peel that back to the clinical side, it's what you were talking about. It is the parasympathetic, sympathetic response, the brain sending messages going, oh my God, I don't know if this is real or not, right? Because now we're talking about it and our brain can't tell if it's real, sends the messages, and that person feels like ass and is like, yeah, that was fun. I'm not doing that again. Then he says to me, it was so it was so profound when he did this. It was almost like the world sending a message like, here it is for you, Donna. This is it. And then he says, and then I did group therapy. I said, you did? He goes, yep, I did that. How'd that go? Not so well. And I said, which I was intrigued because a lot of times they're a little calmer when they're with their own, right? He was Army person. And he says, so I'm in there. And he said, there was a kid from AIT. And for the audience that's not military or not Army, AIT is basically tech training. So you come into basic training, you do that stuff first, and then you go on to your specialty and you do your schooling. And that's what AIT essentially is for the Army. And so he's like, he was in AIT, and he's talking about PTSD. Clinical mind over here thinks, oh, damn, was there an MST that happened? Was he bullied? Like something happened to him there. Like, who knows, right? However, he obviously is like, this guy's a wuss. This guy's weak, right? He's an AIT. Like, you don't know anything yet. I had a whole career. I was a Vietnam vet. Like, he's comparing notes, right?
I was trying to give you the. I can't make it see.
Oh, what does it say?
I wrote down when you were about to talk, because everybody says the same thing in group therapy. Everybody else in that group therapy is fucked up.
Yeah, they're all messed up. Like, why are you there, right? And then you're like,
yeah, exactly.
So he was like, yeah. And he's like, so this kid is there talking about PTSD. And he goes, and I had had enough. And I choked him out. And I looked at him, I go, verbally or physically? He's like, physically. I grabbed him. So I was like, whoa, right? And I didn't say a word. I listened to him and I said, I said, imagine if the same situation happened, but instead of you jumping up, I go, you reacted, right? Something said, holy crap, you're like a danger. I can't deal with you. And you reacted. I said, what if you could have more of a response and maybe only come up with calling him like a fucktard or something? He goes, well, I think I did that too. And so, but if that wasn't the clearest message from our veterans, and when I say veterans, I am including for our first responder world too, because that is what's happening. And when you feel like that, you are not, I'm not going to say you're not, I'm not knocking talk therapy. I'm with you. I do think there's a place for it. But when you've had something that's happened to you that feels so bad, for some people, talking about it is re-traumatizing. Talking about it is a physical response. I've had people go on medication because their blood pressure went through the roof. Where do we go from there? I can't have you stroke out because you're talking about something that caused a moral injury. We can't be doing that. So,
exactly. Yeah.
Like we don't want to cause more harm, right? That's not our goal. So enter, here we go, the neuroscience, right? And so I one day was talking with, if you name Dr. Ross. Dr. Ross is a therapist. He has Ross Institute. There's one that was up here, and he's had a couple places. But I know this gentleman because he was helping me with a service member we were taking care of. And we were talking one day, and I said, here's my thoughts. I go, and for whatever they're worth, I'm like, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a super smart neuroscientist. I'm like, I'm just a military nurse, right? As simple. I said, but in my head, after watching all this and listening to all these different things, and this is before this guy ever said anything, but I said, it seems to me that talk therapy is not always the best first choice. That if we can find the ways to decrease the inflammation first through other modalities, then there might be a place to finish some of the healing. Because believe it or not, through some of this you will heal, and you will not have to talk about some of this stuff because your brain will process better and not necessarily send the messages. But there may be things that you now can talk about and you can share, and you don't have a physical. This is the question. What is it that stops that parasympathetic sympathetic response? What is it that helps stop that? So for every modality that exists, and you know the laundry list is extremely long,
Yeah.
we are all trying to do the same thing. And so when you're dealing it on the clinical side, psychotherapy, talk therapy, CBT, PET,
EMDR.
neuroscience, neurofeedback, neuroentrainment, et cetera, all trying to do the same thing. On the lay person side, when you get into like the nonprofits, what are we trying to do? We're trying to build a sense of community to help them feel safe, to help bring that. We're all trying to do it. Like, literally thousands of us are all trying to do the same thing in different ways. And I say this all the time to the audience. Be an advocate for yourself. And I know it's not easy when you're like, I am beat down. I can't do this anymore. And that's where community comes in. But be exploratory. Be willing to try things. Not everything will work for everybody. I could send people to the absolute best place in the world, and they could have a horrible experience because they're not ready for it, right? So I say that as kind of a PSA, right? I always try to get the audience to understand. I was like, you've got to advocate for your family member, for yourself. A lot of times the community, it's the spouses, and I'm sure, Tony, you'll agree to this. The spouses are like, dude, you're being a douche. Like, that's not cool.
Uh-huh.
Like,
Oh, yeah.
and that's the awareness, right? It's not you. It's them responding to you going wrong, right? So having said all that, that's always like my middle of the PSA thing. When we get into this modality, when we're talking, and I'm a little nerdy, like you and I have talked, I talk neurofeedback because I've used neurofeedback. My son's used neurofeedback. I'm a huge advocate of it. And then this is neuroentrainment, right? And is that correct? I'm saying it correctly.
Neuroacoustic modulation. So there's a form of entrainment. Yeah.
So first of all, we're going to explain to the audience what entrainment is, like what we're doing.
Well,
in the simplest of terms.
Before we do that, let me set the table, because that was a lot to unpack too. And you're right. I think part of the problem is we start with, traditionally in talk therapy, pathology first framing. Mm-hmm. And veterans aren't damaged. They're running high performance neural hardware that's been forced into constant overdrive. They've adapted well to a situation, and they're just stuck in that adaptation. And that's, you talked about it.
Will you contend the TBIs, though, do cause that you have to make different pathways? You know?
Yeah, so a TBI is actually a physical lesion on the brain.
Correct.
And so those synapses and neural pathways they're closed down.
Right.
So what you need to do is create additional neuroplasticity.
Collateral, right.
That's
exactly.
neuroplasticity to create more synaptic connections.
Right.
But the real issue in PTSD is chronic sympathetic activation. And that's not a character flaw. It's a system state. And that can be measured, modulated, and restored. Our brains are very plastic. They adapt to our entire lives. But every once in a while, they get stuck. So narrative was really lack operational metrics. Mm-hmm. We use EEG validated signatures. We literally inventory who you are from a neurophysiological standpoint. And we can show you what's happening in your nervous system: stress, sleep, cognitive load, emotional regulation, with the same level of detail and clarity that you might get from a weapon system or an aircraft. That's what someone wants to see, is show me where I am, and show me how to close the gap between where I am and where I want to be. And it replaces the tell me how you feel with, here's what your brain's doing right now, and let me show you how to kind of change that. So, the insight, if there's a core sort of insight to this, is that trauma is a stuck oscillation pattern. It's not a moral failure. PTSD, chronic stress, moral injury, they all map to the same specific patterns. And those are things like, you want to get nerdy? Hyper beta activation, frontal limbic decoupling, poor delta theta stability during sleep, flat and gamma coherence, dorsolateral prefrontal asymmetric alpha. Too much in the right side, too much on the right side is pretty good. That makes you biased for optimism. Too much on the left side is chronic depression. And hemispheric synchrony, both sides of your brain working together, is something that you can impact very easily with entrainment if you know the right way to do it.
Let me throw this one in there too. You said that, I was like, oh, so How many times have you heard veterans and first responders say, I used to like to read, now I can't read. I can't stay focused. Oh, the doctor says
Yeah.
now I have ADHD. I have AD. And I'm like, mm. And when you said all that, I went, yeah. And how do we end up with things like quote unquote ADD, ADHD? Talk to that.
So ADHD is a function of aperiodic slope. What is aperiodic slope? Signal to noise. Your brain has these oscillations. You have these brain waves, right? And everybody thinks, oh, if you believe what you see on Facebook or these kind of $25 gadget advertisements, we play this sound and you feel better. That's not how it works. It's a symphony of modulation. That's your brain isn't ever locked into one frequency, and if it is, you're in a coma.
Right, right.
What what's happening there is that you're losing the regulatory capacity to shift states, so you're stuck in a particular state. Um, and when you think about things like I'm trying to explain the aperiodic slope. So you have the primary signal, the primary state that your brain is in, and what's a state? Upregulation, downregulation. If I want to go to sleep, I need to be in a state of mind that I can relax and sleep. If I want to run a marathon, I need to be in a state or a frame of mind. It's not like we're giving you thoughts, we're giving you the frame. We're creating the neuro platform for you to do these things.
Well,
High engagement,
and the
stillness, focus flow.
and certain brain waves have to take over. Like if you're going to sleep, your theta should rise.
Well, it's not just one. See,
No.
what
But
you, yeah,
what I was trying to say was like when somebody in the simplest forms, what I'm saying,
yeah,
and correct me
yeah,
if I'm off on this, but I'm,
yeah.
I'm pulling my neurofeedback nerdiness on it. But in the simplest forms, when you have your theta and your gamma and your delta and your alpha and your beta, they should
Hmm.
all be kind of oscillating together, and some should be higher at certain times than others, but nothing
Right.
should be off the chart. So, and I'll relate this to my son, super simple, but he has ADHD diagnosed at 7 years old, right? When we did a QEEG on him, his theta was 34. And for the audience, a theta should be floating somewhere below 10 or so when it's
Yeah,
like
around
during the
8 is normal.
daytime. Yeah, like during the daytime, it should be low, like below 10, like 8, like you were saying. And then at night, that will rise a little bit, not off the damn charts. It will just rise. It'll be more prominent than your activated waves, which are your high alpha, beta, all that stuff, in the simplest forms, right? And when you have in my case with our son, his theta during the day was 34. That kid was in dreamland all day. You know what I mean? Again,
Think of it
simplified.
Think of it this way, as opposed to the specific, remember the days of AM and FM radio,
Yeah.
where in the background you get a lot of static.
Mm-hmm.
That's aperiodic slope. So when your brain is doing its thing and it's cogitating and you're trying to relax, trying to read, trying to focus on something, the aperiodic slope describes how much background noise you have. And the steeper the slope, the more focused you can become.
That's a good way to see it. Yep, I get that.
The shallower the slope, the more noise comes into the signal and the more distractible you are. So it's not purely a function, you're right about brainwaves, but it's not purely a function of how much amplitude you have in a brainwave. It's also a
Right.
function of what's called phase amplitude coupling, how one set of brainwaves drives another. So great, you talk about theta. If you really want to relax, believe it or not, so for those who don't know, delta is deep, deep below dreaming sleep.
Right.
It's a slow 0 to 4 cycles a second brainwave that is the most physically restorative thing that you can have. When you're sleeping, when you're not dreaming, when you're in your deepest sleep, delta is so important to your brain health because what happens is, if you're not familiar with sort of human physiology, we all have lymph nodes. And what do lymph nodes do? They clean our organs.
Mm-hmm.
Where's the lymph node in your brain? There ain't
There
one.
ain't one.
So how does your brain clean itself? Well,
Exactly.
you have a glymphatic system in your brain, these glial cells in your brain. And what happens is when you engage in very deep, slow wave sleep, those cells actually shrink. They compress themselves and they pull cerebral spinal fluid up your spinal column into your brain over the corpus callosum, soaking into all those folds in the brain. And the longer and deeper you sleep, the longer and deeper they get in there and clean out broken proteins, amylase plaque, all of the things that create brain fog, fuzziness. The longer you engage in that, the deeper the cleaning is until when you wake up or you go into REM sleep, which is going from delta to basically alpha theta, that will push all that fluid with all of that cleaned out junk down your cerebral spinal, down your spine, into your liver and kidneys.
And you pee.
Easy peasy, cleans it out, right?
Yeah.
And then you pee, right? And if you're like me, you get up at 3 a.m. and pee.
You obviously got a lot of cleaning going on there.
Well, yeah. And theta, think of theta as your subconscious connection, alpha as your meditative connection, beta is your normal waking state. Gamma provides insight, but too much gamma also creates a lot of anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have PTSD, or not PTSD, I'm sorry, if you have ADHD and OCD, you definitely have a very shallow aperiodic slope. You've got a lot of that noise in the background. And one of the ways to address that is through theta gamma coupling. And think of it as an ocean, as the beach where the ocean meets the shore. Mm-hmm. Big giant waves, slow waves, driving smaller and smaller waves. And not to get super nerdy, but phase amplitude coupling means that the slower theta waves are actually in synchrony with the faster gamma waves. And what you're doing there, a lot of people, by the way, who have ADHD have terrible memories because short-term memory needs to be encoded, and to a large extent when we're conscious. So using a modulation technique to put those together not only makes you very calm, but it also makes you very insightful. It creates this sort of focus concentration that you need. And if I add in an alpha beta coupling, what you get there is sensory motor coupling to your narrative, the narrative part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex. And what does that do? Well, I'll tell you a great example.
Functioning.
That's upregulation. So I work way too much. I work on weekends. I don't get enough exercise. My wife loves to play pickleball, and all my friends play pickleball, and they're all really good, and I suck, and I never get to play. So I took our sensory motor coupling called flow focus technology, and I listened to it for 12 minutes before I went to play pickleball, and we won 5 games. And the people we were playing against said, "How are you doing that?" I said, "How am I doing what?" "Well, how do you know where I'm going to hit the ball?" I'm like, "I don't know where you're going to hit the ball." "Yeah, but every time you hit it, you start running to the place where I'm going to hit it, and I haven't hit it yet." And what we're doing there is we're changing the frame rate of your perception. So you think about a movie shot 24 frames per second. And that's standard film time. Yeah. If I double the frame rate, everything slows down. So the interesting thing is, wearing a Whoop, wearing an Oura ring, I can see what my physiological stress is when I play pickleball. And it's usually around a 15 on a scale of 1 to 16. When I use the tech, it's like a 12.
Oh, how funny.
Because I'm much more calm and focused, but I'm so metabolically efficient. Well, I'm metabolically efficient, so I can get a better result with less physiological stress. And that's the same thing in the military. How you served 21 years in the Air Force. Mm-hmm. How much sleep do people in the military get, especially when you're downrange?
Gosh.
One of our board members is a retired Marine Lieutenant General, John Sattler. General Sattler has the distinction of being the commanding general of the Second Battle of Fallujah, the largest battle we fought since Vietnam.
Yep.
And he tells a story about how General Abazid was just screaming at him because for a year he didn't sleep more than 3 hours a night. He was a mess, just a mess. And what he could have done if he had gotten better sleep. So that's a long explanation for the ADHD thing. But yeah, so what we're really doing here is we're creating a regulatory capability, right? The operators lose range after years of threat detection. They get stuck on high. They're hypervigilant. How many people do you know, probably including yourself, you go to a restaurant, I got to sit with my back to the door, or not to the door, got to sit with my back to the wall and watch the door.
You know what's funny about that? Because of the population I take care of, I actually will be the one to ask them where they want to sit, and I handle the whichever it was.
And where do they want to sit?
Oh, they always want their back to the door. Yeah, right. They don't want their back to the door. They want to be able to see it. And honestly, part of the reason why I'm pretty calm with it is because I'm so used to talking to these people that are constantly scanning. I'm like, nothing going to happen to me. He's over there scanning everything already. That's where they're...
Everybody still wants to let me sit with my back to the wall, and I don't care anymore. It just doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, it doesn't just help veterans, right? It does. A veteran doesn't heal in isolation.
You,
The system around them needs stability.
you know what's funny about that too? Like when you said I don't really care where I sit now. I think some of it we rationalize away. We don't necessarily think of it as a system, the
Right.
brain putting that. We rationalize it as in the military, and I protect my people, and that's why I do that. And it's like, although that's great, and thank you for being, that protector, but that's not necessarily what's happening. Your
Yeah.
body is telling you there could be a problem. It's in that hyper vigilant state, and it doesn't have to be. Like there are ways
Yeah.
to kick out of it, and we're stuck in it. And so, and again, I'm going to get a little nerdy on this. And correct me just correct me if I'm off on this, but when all this stuff is happening, and I mean, and I'm going to just use the term dysregulation for an easy, like I know we've talked about that, but when the brain is, well, let's say not optimally regulating, right? For the environment they're in right now. So in
I
garrison.
think that's a better way to say it. When it's not adapting to the current situation.
Right. There we go. It's not adapting to the current situation. What else, my understanding is also happening is that there's lag going on. And what I mean by that is that like working, motivation. And other parts of the brain are like, hey, let me help you out kind of thing. And when it's trying to help out other parts of the brain, then it causes almost like a slow, it's not functioning optimally. So I'll use myself as an example. So I had a cue done. And oh my God, they were having a field day with my cue. They were just like, how'd you do in high school? And how'd you do in college? And all these questions were getting pelted at me, right? And I'm like, I graduated. I did well. I mean, I'm a nurse. I actually graduated kind of higher in my class. And, and I'm totally lost, right? And the person that does our neurofeedback, he says, I do not put diagnosis on here. These are just, we have to re-regulate the brain. He does not believe on attaching the label to it. So he's not saying anything to me. So I'm like, okay. What he said to me, I would tell him, I'm like, my brain, when I come in, I feel like the front of my brain is pushing out. It's not a headache. It just feels like massive pressure. And he goes, oh, I can fix that. I mean, just very nonchalantly, like, oh, I can turn that down. I'm like, well, is there a dial in there or something? He's like, sort of. And so then he starts talking to me about my SMR. And for the audience, it's the center part of your brain, just for simplicity. Right. And I'm absolutely know that I am talking very basic here, but center part of your brain is the SMR. And there's a cingulate in there, and there's the anterior, the front part of it, and there's the posterior.
Anterior cingulate cortex.
Yep. Yes, and the posterior cingulate cortex.
That's your emotional regulation system.
I love analogies. So imagine this as your teeter-totter, and this should work gently. It should go forward and backward based on scenarios that you're in. You should be able to emotionally regulate according to what's going on. Mine was going 952,000 miles an hour on the anterior. So the anterior is the move forward. The posterior is like, hey, slow down. And I am going full force. The posterior looks like brakes that are locked up on a plane, smoking, going, holy crap, stop. The front's like, yeah, no, we got this. And they're like, yeah, you don't. And my frontal, or I guess frontal, prefrontal area is going, hey, right, we're going to help you. Even though that's not our job, we're going to go back there and help the posterior slow you down. Right. And it doesn't really work. What it does to me is I am now dysregulated in the sense, like I can't organize thoughts. My forehead hurts. And when it got to an extreme, which this happened to me, my brain, and I did not even know this was a thing until it was explained to me years later, my brain disconnected from my brain said, you're done, and disconnected from my body. And let me tell you what that looked like. That looked like my child who was 15 months old that kept having respiratory issues and had to get brought in the ER, I swear to God, like every other weekend, and we could not figure out what's going on, is now getting admitted. The situation was I was teaching college, my husband's deployed, I'm in the middle of getting new windows in our house. There's a lot of stuff going on. I bring him up in the ER. We're there for like 6-8 hours, and all of a sudden, I don't feel good. And scroll ahead, we bring him up to the room. They said, Mom, you need to sit on the bed. And I said, okay. And I sit on the bed, and I nearly pass out because I'm so dizzy and I don't know what's going on. And we're at a children's hospital. And we get up there. Happened to be my friend was there. I said, can you pick him up? Because they're like, Mom, you need to go put him in the bed. And I'm like, I can't. I couldn't move. They had to help me to a bed. They asked me, Children's Hospital, ma'am, do you need an ambulance? And I was like, no, I just need to lay here for a minute. Couldn't open my eyes, could not function. I'm barely answering questions. They think I need the ER. My girlfriend's like, are you okay? I'm like, I will be. I felt like I was completely hungover and couldn't function. I had no idea what happened to me. Went to bed. Fortunately, they didn't send me to another hospital. Thank goodness. I sucked it up. Had a massive splitting headache, like bad, bad, bad. Next morning I woke up. I'm elated because all I have is a headache left and I can function. No idea what happened. Until 6 years later, I have a guy doing neurofeedback says, oh, your brain disconnected. It said, you will not listen and we are in overload.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's a long version with a story and analogy and all that other stuff. But the brain's job is to function, and it's going to do it however it can. And so I kind of say, like, relate that to the military. When they say get the mission done, they're like, yeah, that was like duct tape and bubble gum, but we got it done. And the brain will do the same thing. At least that's my experience and very simple understanding of that.
Well, funny you talked about how the parts of your brain start working in opposition to each other. So there's two components to that. One is what's called interhemispheric coherence, right? So that's emotional regulation requires kind of a balanced crosstalk. Right hemisphere of your brain detects threat, processes emotional salience. Left hemisphere contextualizes it, labels it, and that applies control. When the two sides fall out of sync, emotional signals either flood the system and you're overloaded, or they get blunted and disconnected, which is what a lot of veterans do. They just disconnect emotionally from the whole thing.
AKA dissociate.
Yep. Dissociation is a huge part of that. So high coherence keeps emotional intensity and executive control in the same conversation, right? They're not pulling across, they're not working against each other.
Yeah.
And stress states are clearly marked by hemispheric fragmentation, right? The chronic stress, trauma, hypervigilance, the hemispheres drift apart in timing. And what you see is, again, a little bit of nerd here, unstable delta theta bridging at night. And that means the system is spending a ton of energy just coordinating itself. It's so metabolically inefficient. Your brain takes about 12 watts of energy to have a thought, to essentially create a cognitive spark. The problem is when you have that thought and you can't come down from it, now you're stuck. You're stuck in overdrive, and that is just eating up acetylcholine, oxygen, hemoglobin from your blood, and it's making you tired and giving you a headache.
And what is that called? And this was another whole thing that happened that I didn't know. I told you that the person that does neurofeedback with me says, I do not label, because he goes, sometimes it's self-prophesizing, right?
Right.
So he never said this to me. And after, I nerd out with him, so he explains everything, and I'm always just absorbing all this stuff, right? So years of this talk, right? And all of a sudden, after probably, I bet you 5 years of conversation, I looked at him and I'm like, okay, so essentially, I have high functioning anxiety. And I go, that's what causes EFD. And he goes, yep.
Yeah.
Because
absolutely.
I would not shut off. And then the area that's supposed to be organizing jumps in to say, slow the hell down. And I can't organize.
We're not on video, but I have my bottom hand pushing on my top hand. So part of your anxiety is doing this.
Yep.
And your executive network is going, no, no, no. Yeah. No, no, no.
Yep.
And they just fight each other. So, when you think about that, when you create a neuromodulation protocol that stabilizes coherence stabilizes the autonomic nervous system, the brainstem, the prefrontal cortex.
Right.
They use cross-hum patterns, vagal tone. And when coherence is high, your autonomic nervous system has a very clean signal to regulate from. And when it's low, it's noisy, reactive, inconsistent.
And for the simplest terms for the audience, when we're saying the autonomic nervous system, we're talking about the sympathetic parasympathetic response, and that is related to your heart rate going up, when you get sweaty palms, like you get into a situation and your stomach's churning, and it is not something you can control. Like, for example, when I was a kid going to take a test, I would always have to go to the bathroom first. I would feel sick to my stomach. I would always have that response. Yeah. Scroll ahead years later where I had better control, but it didn't matter. Anytime there was a test, I don't care if it was my PT test or an actual written test, boom, I had to go to the bathroom. My response happened. Like, it was just a response. So when we're talking all the, autonomic nervous system and stuff, we're saying the brain sending messages to the body to react. And if it's not a real situation, this is where things like PTSD, when we talk about flashbacks and things like that, happen. I had a situation where somebody kind of jumped my chili. It was very unexpected. It ended up kind of triggering me. The next day I went into a meeting with the same person in that room. It was a normal meeting. It was just the normal, like, mundane kind of meeting. I walked out, my heart rate was 120.
Wow.
My body said, you are still in danger, even though I wasn't. I mean, except that he was still an asshole, but you're still in danger, right? And so we're going to raise your heart rate and warn you, like, so you can get out of the situation.
So, coherence is the nervous system's alignment geometry.
Right.
When the hemispheres fire in sync, the brain regulates itself, and when they drift apart, regulation collapses.
I'm gonna throw in the statement, but we are not going to go down this rabbit hole because there's another podcast we did on this. But if I could tell people why it is so important for, one, your healing, because I always tell people you are not responsible for your trauma, you are responsible for your healing, right? If there is any reason to get on that, is epigenetics. And then the short version of that is that when you have had trauma and you haven't had that healed or regulated, that is shown genetically in your genes, not behavior, although behavior also, but in your genes, you can pass this on to not only your children. If you're a female, you can pass it on to your grandchildren because you're carrying that. There is a whole podcast you guys can go find, Bonnie Goff, and listen to that. A whole other one I nerded out with, and I loved it. But this is important. So when we are healing the brain, we are not only just ourselves, we are healing our generations. We are helping with things like generational trauma. We are helping breaking those cycles on a behavioral level and on a physiological level. I mean, it's that important. I'm sure you have no desire to have an ex-wife and broken marriages and putting children through that stuff. Like, nobody has that desire. That is not a choice. And anybody that's been through it and healed, I can still, when I see them talk about it, there's still that, like, shit, if I would have had this information earlier. So I can't holler loud enough. If you're a mom, you got kids in the military, talk to them about this stuff. It is important for you to heal, and there are so many modalities to do this, right? Yeah. And so I'm going to throw this question at you. Tony and I ended up having a 2-hour-long conversation. So we decided that we were going to be kind and break this up into part 1 and part 2 of the podcast. So head on over to part 2 and you can finish listening to our conversation all about peak neuro and all the wonderful work they're doing with our veterans and first responders.
Thanks for listening to Beyond the Front Line, a podcast of coming home well. Join us every other Wednesday. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. Thanks again. And until all are home and all are well.